Back. Today we're going to talk about scripting with code, and in this case, JavaScript code. So as you know, Inhouse Cloud is 100% no code, but there are those people that find writing code very comfortable. They're very comfortable with this, and they would much rather write code than perhaps use the no code script interface for a myriad of reasons. So for this, we've provided the ability to have the best of both worlds. So you can use Inhouse Cloud, functions 100% no code, or you can use it in a low code fashion. All right. So we're going to be demoing out different concepts. So first, let's just start off with setting a variable. So we're going to set a variable. It's going to call this random. It's going to be a number. So we have our script user interface. We have a video for the script user interface where we've gone into detail. It's basically the tiniest unit of logic with functions, and we can chain together our script user interface to have some scripting, and in this case, no code scripting. So we can switch between the types. So let's say we want to do some simple multiplication. I can just say, 5. And another step, use the operator expression, multiply by, switch to a number, 5. It's that easy, right? So you basically just multiply fives without any code. Of course, this is an abstraction, right? But there are those people that might want, to do this, their way. They might want to do this a little faster. And for them, using code is ideal. And, for those people, they can just as easily switch to the code tab and say 5 by 5. So, depending on who you are, you can do it either way, right? So let's take an extra look, a second look. This code block is still wrapped up in our script user interface, meaning that we can combine our code with no code. So we can still add expression methods to whatever the response is. So let's just add something random. This is like an absolute. So basically, when the 5 times 5 resolves, uh, whatever is resolves to gets passed into an absolute method. We can still chain, just like we would without code. Five. All right, so here we have 5 by 5, absolute by 5. So in this case, we basically just used no code, and we basically used some code, right? So you have it, whatever way you feel comfortable, you know. So let us take a deeper look at our function mode. So there is a concept of basically running code in basically a sandbox, and that's exactly what's going on here. Because running code or user generated code is very dangerous, right? Because people can inject all kinds of malicious logic or malicious scripts that can cripple whatever environment the code runs. We basically run all code in a context. So what this means is that there are only a few things that the function can access from the outside world that we provide. In this case, there are three things there are three um, variables, or I guess arguments, that we provide into our context. The first one is the parameter, which is basically the parameters of your function. The second is the variable, which is the variables of your function. And then the third one that we currently provide is the moment library, which is just a dating library for dates and time and time functions and things of that nature. Now, you know, uh, we will be adding more to the context as users begin to demand some more. We will be updating the context with more available arguments or available parameters. So let's just test out what I mean by context. So what we're going to do here is that we're going to add another step, and we are going to return. And in this case, we're going to use some code. We're going to say random. That's going to be the variable context dot random. So basically, the variable object or the variable context has in it all our variables, right? And if I take this one step further and I just say variable object, and I just put in the variable context as a standalone, we should see what that resolves to. And here I'm going to say route parameters, which is going to be referencing our route parameters, which in this case we probably would not have one. So I'm just going to change this to request headers. We're just going to look at our request headers. I'm just going to change this to request headers. We're going to use our parameter context, and then we are going to tap into the request headers. Okay. I'm going to save this and deploy. So our function, our tutorial demo function, is currently connected to an API, our tutorial API, and we're going to use this API to test our function. So our goal is to just see what this resolves to. We basically we are returning an object with a couple of the contexts being referenced, our variable context and our parameter context. As you can see, we have the random variable resolving accurately to 25. We have our variable object that has the two variables that we defined in our function, and here we're basically just getting the request headers that is now our parameters in our function system generated parameters request header. So just a quick rundown. With the in-house function builder, you can use this 100% without code. But if you would indeed like to code or use code, you can basically, within the script user interface, switch to the code tab and write your code. Now we understand also that there are certain contexts that have been exposed within our code framework. Three to be specific: the variable context, which is basically housing all our variables; the parameter context that houses all our parameters; and the moment library, which can be just referenced as moment in lowercase. And also this function or this code block is running JavaScript. So basically you can run any uh, JavaScript logic you want to run, but however, certain contexts have been, you know, excluded. So you cannot like reference a document, so you can only reference variables, parameters, and uh, the moment library. Finally, before we leave, if you had to use or if you had to write functions, right, full-blown functions using code, you would have to wrap your function in a script expression or in a That way it's executed, or in the function expression, rather. That way it's executed, inline. So let's just rewrite this really quickly. I'm just going to call this a function. I'm going to say return, to drop that object in there. And just for fun, let's just give this function a name. Function run logic. I'm just gonna say run logic. We call this function. Save, deploy, pull up Postman, ping it. So that doesn't work. So it doesn't work because this is not an expression that can be executed, right? So to get this to work properly, what I can do here is basically this. I could remove the direct call over there. I could wrap this up in an executable. Basically, uh, so basically this is just like a expression that basically just runs almost immediately. And let's just save that, deploy. Now there's one thing that is not right here. We're gonna come back to it. Let's just run it first. Right. So you don't necessarily have to, in this case, you don't have to uh, give your function a name and all that stuff. It's not necessarily wrong, but you don't have to do things like this. You could just have your function plain, or you can use modern syntax, whatever you're comfortable with. All will work. Right. Same thing. Let's open up Postman, ping it, same result. So there you have it. We've basically just gone over how to use code, and basically, we understand that for those who are very, very comfortable with code, you have that option to write with low code, and that option is available wherever you see the script user interface. You can indeed chain no code scripts with coded scripts, and you can also add expression methods to coded scripts. We now know how to uh, write full-blown functions and run them inline, and we understand the context within a function as being, the variable, the parameter, moment library, and just a basic JavaScript API. And finally, if we had arguments in our function, we could pass that, from within our expression call. So let's say I had some argument that was going to pass in, and let's say I wanted to pass in variable random code. Argument, I could basically just put that argument. I could name that argument, and just add that to my object. Save that, deploy. And I have the argument, which is our random code that we passed in. So, I've probably gone overboard with these explanations because most of you who are going to be using the code are advanced and you already know all you need to know from what I've shown. Um, for any more questions, you can look to the community forums. For those people who are not really savvy with code, don't worry, you can still use the no-code script user interface and everything will work just the same. All right. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.